Hi, I'm Kim Kelling, and I'm here with graduates of the Leadership Florida program, and we're going to be talking about how Leadership Florida impacts Florida as well as local communities. Joining me today, we have John Horn. John is the president and owner of Anna Maria Oyster Bars.
Yes.
Also a graduate of Leadership Florida, Class 28.
Correct.
Pam Truitt. She's the president of Truitt Consulting, and her work focuses on nonprofit partnerships for mission impact. You're also a graduate of Leadership Sarasota, Leadership Manatee, as well as Leadership Florida.
Yes, Class 26, Leadership
Class
Florida.
26. And my last guest is Gabe Lament. Sorry, Gabe. And Gabe is also a graduate of Connect, which is a Leadership Florida program. And you're also I want to get this right, you're a strategist you've worked on many political campaigns, successful political campaigns here in Florida.
Yes, a political strategist for local campaigns. Thank you for having us on the show.
Well, thank you all for joining me today. So Pam, I want to start with you. What is Leadership Florida, and what is the mission of Leadership Florida?
Leadership Florida is a statewide program that is best described as for people who love Florida and who are invested in Florida and want it to be the best state it can be. It's been around since 1982, was born out of the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and has now selected 35 classes. People are selected from around the state based on their leadership, whether it's in some form of community or industry leadership.
So who usually participates, and what did you get out of the program?
Well, I think the first question, or who participates, is people, I believe, who want to grow more, to know more about Florida. Florida is now the third largest state in population. It's a very complex state. I recently talked to a colleague in Arizona who said, working in Florida is like working in 10 separate states because it's so diverse.
It's so true.
And so I think people who apply to the program are those who want to learn and grow and help Florida be the best state. I applied because I have an insatiable appetite to learn, and I'm a natural connector.
Absolutely. If I could add to that, I mean, you talk about the diversity of Florida, and that's how they try to put the classes together. That kind of emulates how the diversity of the state is. The classes try to match the diversity of the state to keep that input from all different classifications.
Yeah, good point, John.
Yeah.
And what is the Connect Florida program? What? And I know that's what Gabe was a part. So what is that program?
Well, Connect Florida is the state's preeminent leadership program for emerging leaders in the state of Florida.
Does emerging mean maybe a little younger?
Maybe a few years younger than Leadership Florida, but ages 25 through 39. And like Leadership Florida, they are looking for the emerging leaders in their particular industries, whether it be healthcare, philanthropy, government, education. And the class of that particular year, of typically 30 to 35 members, travels around the state to the biggest cities in the state, Miami, Tampa, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, and learn about the most pressing challenges facing that particular city and how it fits into the whole picture in the state of Florida.
So what did you get out of it, Gabe? All that sounds good, but what did you get out of it?
Well, one, I learned about the most pressing challenges facing the state, but two, I was inspired at every one of those conferences. Personally, the most inspiring moment for me was when the program coordinators asked me to introduce former Governor and Senator Bob Graham. And I'll never forget it. He's a Florida icon.
Right. So it gives you that kind of access to meet Florida's great leaders, be inspired by them, want to become a leader yourself.
Correct.
And John, you've been involved since you were class 28 and we're now in class 35, and you've stayed involved.
Yeah, and that's the great part about it is you can go through the program, and you have 5 weekends, long weekends that you participate. But you can stay involved. I mean, there's such a statewide activity, there's such a statewide group. You can get involved on a state level, which I did on the state board, et cetera. But you can also stay involved regionally. And that's what Leadership Florida is broken into 9 regions across the state. So you can stay and have an impact in your region. It's putting the people together, the leaders from your region together. You can reach out and ask for help and say, we need to work on this project. and you've immediately got people that are in your area that know the area.
Right, and that sort of common ground of all being graduates of a program, it's an easier call to make. People are more willing to get involved.
Right, absolutely. You can pick up the phone and say, hey, this is John. I was in class 28. Can you call me back and I need to ask you for help or which direction I should go? And somebody's going to call you right back. That's the great part, is because they know you immediately have the same goal in mind.
Right.
You know, make Florida better.
That's a good goal to have.
Yeah.
So Pam, I know that there's the traditional Leadership Florida program, and then there's the Connect program. What other programs are part of Leadership Florida?
Great question. Actually, I'd like to follow up on one thing, that just to elaborate on what Gabe said about Connect Florida, which is, Gabe's generation is our future. And so that was a recognition that Leadership Florida had, that need to extend the knowledge and the love of Florida to our next generation. And so Connect has only been in as a program since 2009, and is now growing rapidly. In addition to Connect, there's the College Leadership Florida, which is for college juniors, and then the executive program, which is for new executives in Florida in the C-suite, or new to the C-suite who have been in Florida for a while, and it's kind of someone described it as information through a fire hose. But everyone, the executives who've been through that are really impressed by what they have learned in a very quick time period that they would need to know to be successful in our state.
There's so many challenges, and the thing that I'm sensing from all three of you is that you own this program. It's not like it's some organization or it's a top down. It's really more from the bottom up. The class participants really are the ones who then run with the program.
Yeah.
Right. And they stay involved with it. And so their direction keeps, they get the input from everyone that's gone through, but they keep the focus of the group as one focal point, and that's nice.
Right. I think that's so interesting that it becomes, you have such pride and ownership of being part of such a program.
Right.
So, like Gabe, as a young, starting out professional, have you stayed in touch with your classmates in the program?
Yes, and the statewide network that you have access to, as John and Pam stated, is second to none. Whether you're a political strategist or a legislative aide, you now have everybody's phone number across the state, whatever industry it may be. So I couldn't be more thankful for that opportunity.
And when you go through the program and you have these program days and they're all around the state, people come in and speak to you, and leaders from across the country come in and speak. So, I'm sure that must be very inspirational.
It is. That's a powerful part of it, and that's where you say, what do you get out of it? Well, you learn a lot about your state. I went through Leadership Manatee and had lived there for 30 years, thought I knew Manatee. You find out you don't know as much about your own backyard as you think, and so growing up in Florida, you think you know everything about Florida. It's the same thing, only kind of exponential. So you learn a lot about the state, you learn a lot about the whole country actually, but you learn a lot more about the people. There's so many experiences you have with your class. You bond with your class. I had 52 in my class, and we're all, probably 50 of us are very, very tight. They stay very active. The Pineapple Nation, it just,
right.
Everybody
you all
has
get your nicknames.
You get a nickname, you get all kinds of things. So you have that, but yet, then you've expanded to 2,000 others. So you've got 50 that are tight, you've got 2,000.
Right, access to this much larger network.
Right, and it's just, the door opens immediately.
I want to get back to something you said, that you were so inspired that you got to introduce Governor Bob Graham. And we know that his whole mission is civic engagement. And it seems like this is really what Leadership Florida is about, is civic engagement and getting us to want to care, to want to be involved, to step up into those positions. Because I'm sure from all of this, you've spun off and gotten involved in local organizations, gotten on boards. Some of the things that have come as outcomes of your engagement through Leadership Florida. Pam, the work you're doing seems like it speaks to that.
Well, I will say that I think the typical Leadership Florida candidate not the Connect candidate, but Leadership Florida candidate's got a balance of leadership in their industry and then leadership in their community. And so you're not made a leader in the program.
Right.
You're already doing leadership work wherever you are. And I think that that's probably the most successful candidate for Leadership Florida, is that you're already showing you're caring.
Right.
So
I mean, did you, when you introduced Senator Graham, did you have a sense that you were going to be working on political campaigns? Were you doing that already?
Well, at that particular time, I was in the middle of a very difficult campaign. So having that break where I went away to Miami for the weekend to learn about the nonprofits in Miami, the educational initiatives in Miami, and what their local government looked like, and then the opportunity to introduce Bob Graham, it was a great breath of fresh air and
Recharge your
respite
battery a little
from
bit.
that tough campaign at the time.
Well, we're almost out of time, and I just want to give you each a chance to sort of make some final comment about Leadership Florida and its impact in your lives. I'll start with you, John.
Well, you experience so many different things. In Miami, we played dominoes at a Cuban activity center. So we're playing dominoes with 80-year-old Cuban men and women, and some of it we couldn't speak, but we could play dominoes together. But it's just the interactions that you get, and you do experience things you wouldn't get a chance to experience. But it's the long term that you can stay involved and you can keep Florida just moving forward. Awesome.
Great.
Awesome.
And I would echo what John said. While the speakers are the highest quality and certainly inspiring, I think it was some of the small things, the connections that you made. You know, in our class, we rode on a train in Central Florida, and who knew that was even there in the Mount Dora area? And the people you meet, I'm always impressed by the quality of the people who are accepted to Leadership Florida, and the industries that our state supports. It's just, I learned so much about that, and the more you know, the more you can give back, and I think that's a great value of Leadership Florida.
Great. And Gabe, in just a few, you get the last few
Two
seconds.
aspects of Connect Florida that were so inspiring. One, the knowledge you take away from the world-class speakers that they bring in each city, and two, the inspiration you get from your fellow classmates.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming
Thank
in
you.
and talking about
Thank you.
this.
Appreciate your time.
So to learn more about Leadership Florida, I encourage you to go online and find out about the program and find out about local leadership programs within your own community. Thank you. Hi, I'm Kim Kelling, and I'm here with Leadership Florida. Leadership Florida launched a new program. It's an educational program. It's a deep dive in looking at educational policy here in Florida. And joining me today to talk about this program is Brian Dassler, who is the deputy, I want to make sure I get this right, Brian. You're the deputy chancellor for educator quality.
That's right.
For the Division of Public Education with the Florida Department of Education.
That's right.
And you're also the program chair of this education program.
I am.
And one of our speakers for our education program is Dr. Elizabeth Ahrens. And you are the Chief Executive Officer of Urban Schools Human Capital Academy.
That's right.
So thank you both for coming on today.
Good to be with you.
So Brian, tell me, how did this idea come about to have an education program?
Sure. Kim, it's really great to be able to leverage the incredible reputation and credibility that Leadership Florida has for building statewide community, bringing people together from many, many different diversities, professionally, geographically, et cetera, to learn and grow together and be able to make a difference on behalf of Florida's future. A number of us came together about 2 years ago with the leadership of then Chair David Armstrong, and leadership that continued under Bentina Terry, who's most recently the chair of the Leadership Florida
And you're
Board.
a Leadership Florida grad.
And I am. I was in
didn't
class
add that.
23.
Class 23, okay.
The group of us came together and said, how can Leadership Florida take what it is so good at and so respected for and make a contribution to education in Florida? And so that's how we developed the vision for the Leadership Florida education program. We said that our vision would be to use the Leadership Florida context and approach to bring together educational professionals from all over the state and from many different places within the system of education to contribute to Florida's forward motion.
And this is different because usually Leadership Florida programs, it's a diverse group of participants, where this is really only people that have some role in education.
That's right. For example, you mentioned I was in class 23, so that was 11 years ago, and
You
I
don't
was.
have to say that, but you're so young. Anyway.
I was teaching high school English in Broward County when I was selected for the Leadership Florida program. Of the 55 class members in my class, many of whom, as you heard from the other speakers, and you'll always hear from a Leadership Florida member, some of the best friends and best relationships I have came from my class, the Mad Hatters, class 23. The only other two educators of the 55 included Bill Law, who was the president at the time of Tallahassee Community College, and Kristen Murtaugh, who was a vice president at Florida Atlantic University. The other members of my class included senior executives from banks and major companies in Florida, elected officials from around the state, people who were doing the work that they do to make their communities better in their contexts. What's unique, as you said, about the Leadership Florida education program is that everybody who's been selected for the class has a professional association or responsibility in education.
So how is this structured then? How's the program structured? And I know there are program themes, and so what did you want to get across?
Yeah. We were really lucky to be able to bring together a number of Leadership Florida members who are graduates of Leadership Florida programs to form an advisory board, a committee. One of the folks you've heard from is Pam Truitt, who's a member of that board. And in addition to having a role in selecting the class, that group also helped us design the program. So we landed on 4 sessions in 4 different places around Florida, and we decided that in order to create a common language and the beginning of a shared vision across whatever individual responsibilities people have, to structure the sessions by theme. So the first session is focused on systems, and not just US or Florida systems, but global systems of education. So one of our speakers in that session was someone from the Asia Society, for example. The second session is focused on schools and all of the ways in which the systems around schools, which is why we started there, support leaders and teachers in doing the job to support students. And that's why we're so excited to have Betsy Ahrens as part of this program, because Betsy's expertise, having been head of HR for New York City Department of Education, Montgomery County, Maryland's HR office, as well as Fairfax County, Virginia.
Some small systems.
Some small systems that have done remarkable work over the last 20 years, in large part due to Betsy's leadership, in ensuring that every student has a teacher who's as good as the best any of us ever had. That's sort of our vision.
So, Elizabeth, I want to ask you.
Sure.
Because I think the term is so interesting, human capital.
Right.
When you use that term, what do you mean by that?
It really is the workforce. It's really looking at your 80 to 85% investment in most school districts and in most charter schools. So your budget is predominantly salary and benefits. If you're not looking at the various ways in which you need to support, engage, select, promote, all the aspects of a human resources system, if you're not really invested in that, you are losing out on 80 to 85% of your budget. Is it the only lever in education? Absolutely not. There's a robust curriculum. You need assessments that are aligned. There are other aspects of what you need to do, but human capital is the most important and the largest.
So how do you then ensure, especially when you've come from such large school districts, how do you ensure that you are making that proper investment in such a big part of your budget?
And one of the interesting things is that through the work that we've done in Florida, We're also working with a number of rural districts and with what they call NEFEC, which is the Northeast Consortium of Florida Educational Districts that come together. They're all rural and they have the same challenges as Miami or Tampa would have, because they're struggling as well to recruit and select and retain the best teachers for their students. So it's interesting that our work that started with only urban districts across the nation has really evolved into supporting rural districts as well.
So when you first start with a school district, how do you approach them about, changing the mindset of realizing one of your biggest assets are your teachers?
One of the interesting aspects of education is that the central offices have tended to play, and frankly the State Departments as well, a very compliance-driven role, which never gets you to a high-quality workforce. It will not yield what you are actually looking for by simply checking boxes and doing the compliance work. So when we start with a district or with another aspect of educational organizations, we look to see how much strategic work they do. And if they're not really focusing on the recruitment, selection, development, promotion, all the aspects of human capital work that needs to be done, and they're only focusing on the compliance aspect, that's where we start to move them.
And Brian, with you being involved in quality education and looking at teachers per se, how does what Elizabeth's saying, how does that resonate with you?
Well,
coming from the State Department.
It resonates in many ways. I was a high school English teacher and a high school principal, and so one of the things that is a core belief of the work in the Urban Schools Human Capital Academy, and just in human capital in education today, is supporting principals in making decisions that support their students.
So taking it away from the highest level and bringing it down to the school level.
That's right. There's a role for state level policy, which is to in many ways establish the parameters by which someone gets into the profession. Beyond that, and Florida's, I think, in better shape than most in terms of not being overly prescriptive about who and how and when. Some of the things that I think I've seen come out of the work that districts and leaders across Florida and the country have done with Betsy and her group include just evolving their practices and their policies. We have typically thought it was okay to have systems that resulted in classrooms not being, schools not being fully staffed at the beginning of a year. And those are self-inflicted wounds.
Right.
And they can change when a district has that information. So when I think about the people who Betsy's worked with in Florida, and I think what's really powerful about the Leadership in Education program is, in this room, the folks who are going to hear from Betsy today are school board members, state leaders at the highest level, superintendents, teachers, principals, organizational leaders, business leaders, association leaders from across the state, a small number but representing a really rich diversity, who have in their own ways the levers to support progress and movement.
Well, we're going to have to leave it at that because we're out of time. But ultimately, all of this work is about improving outcomes for students.
That's right.
That's the end goal.
That's the end goal.
So thank you both
Equity and excellence.
for talking today, and I can't wait to hear your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you so much for joining us today and learning more about Leadership Florida and all the programs that fall under Leadership Florida, including this new education program. To learn more about what is happening locally in education, a good starting point is the Education Foundation in your county. Our regional philanthropic efforts are very engaged in bringing educational equality to our communities. A couple of initiatives that come to mind are Suncoast Campaign for Grade Level Reading. You can find them at www.gradelevelreadingsuncoast.net, and STEM Smart, www.gulfcoastcf.org. Thank you also to Manatee Educational TV, to Dr. Ahrens, to Brian Dassler, to all of our guests. We have given you a lot of information today. There are many ways for you to engage locally. If you're interested in learning more about Leadership Florida, please go online to leadershipflorida.org.